Hi, this is Max from GAGE Motorsports. I'm here today to talk to you about our new big valve head and the valve combinations that are available and the materials that go into it. So first off, let me say this GAGE WarHead, if you're going to be ordering one with a big valve, which is at least a 32 millimeter intake, then you'll also notice, at least for now, we're welding these before we do the machining on them. We put a little weld right there, and we put a little weld right inside here. And the reason we do that is because we've changed the angle of the port somewhat, and it breaks into places where it shouldn't be breaking into. So we fix it before we break it. Anyway, but for standard heads, which would be like stock appearing heads and stock heads, there's no weld on those because we're not breaking into anything. So the other thing that comes with the head for people that are running Tillies or flat slide is we do have a adapter that is a adapter for the manifold for a Tilly or for a manifold for a flat slide. And here's an example of the, let's say, the flat slide manifold, okay? And the way this works is we have this is just one that I took apart for a Tilly. One side we have a gasket that is port matched to the head. So you have this. And then it's also port matched on this, in this particular case, to the Tilly. And we give you the gasket for that. Oop, we probably should put it on the right way. Okay, so these are port matched. And so the two gaskets and the manifold adapter comes with this head. All right, that being said, let's talk about the valve sizes. Now the valve sizes on the exhaust side start at 23 millimeters. So if you're running, let's say, a stock appearing class, that 23 is a little bit smaller than you can get on any other head because we cast our ports a little bit undersized. And that gives you a stronger fuel signal during that overlap period to get that air fuel stream in motion a lot faster. So if you're running an intake of 25, 27, 28, even 29, a 23 will work much better than a 24. Okay, so for the exhaust sides, we do have a 23, a 24, a 25, a 27, and a 28. And you can order a head in any valve combination that you want. So if you want to run a 32 intake and a 25 exhaust, or a 27 exhaust, or 28 exhaust, you just tell us what it is that you want, and we'll machine one up for you. All the ports are CNC'd. The combustion chambers are all CNC'd. All the programs are ready to go. It's just a matter of plugging in the right combination of those programs, and we'll spit out the head. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is this gasket surface. If you look at this, this is a lot taller here than it is on a stock head. We added an extra 100 thousandths, so we also brought the combustion chamber up that extra 100 thousandths, which means that we have to use a longer valve stem, and we're using a valve stem that's 150 thousandths longer, so that you actually end up with an extra 50 thousandths of spring height, so that you may not have to cut the spring pockets. But if you do have to cut the spring pockets, even with a 32 millimeter intake port that's been tilted, and we did tilt this, you can see there's very little material here, but the port has been tilted up from this to this, and we'll get into that. I'll show you that in a few minutes. So if you do have to cut this, you still have about a little bit over 100 thousandths that you can go deeper without breaking into that port. So that being said, let's take a look at that port. I mentioned we changed the angle. When you look down this port, you're gonna see something similar to what you would see if you look down a Hemi head. You can almost see the entire seat. All right, can you see that? You can almost see the entire seat down here, which is very similar to a Hemi head, except that it's not a Hemi head, and you can run bigger valves without worrying about valves slamming into each other, which is a problem on Hemi heads. You're also looking at a completely different port shape. We call this our W port. Because you're looking at a fin that's generally seen on the other side, on the roof rather than on the floor. 4 years of research and development is what brought us to this point. Now, how did that work out for us when we tested this head? Let me explain what we did. We took this head, or a head, and we brought it to a third-party dyno, third-party tester, third-party computer, and we ran 3 tests all in the same day, at the same temperature, at the same humidity, and we tested our head against 2 other heads that were done by head builders that you may or may not know. You know, I'm not going to mention their names because I happen to know who they are, and I like them, and they're wonderful guys, and they do a great job. But we did test against them, and on this particular day, on this particular dyno, and on this particular motor, one head made a little over 20 horse, another head made a little bit over 21 horse, and we put our head on. As a matter of fact, it was a similar head to this, the 3225, and we made a little over 26 horse. So there's a huge number there. And I don't want to say that everyone's going to get this, because it just depends on the cam, it depends on the day, it depends on all kinds of things. It's just that on that particular day, that's what we got. So I don't want phone calls going, you know, you're full of it, and yada, yada, yada. This was third-party numbers. I never publish my own numbers just so I don't get into these, what do they call them, peeing contests with people that need to get a life somewhere, I guess. Anyway, this was a third-party number. So you've seen our port now. It looks a lot different than what you're used to seeing, but it is 4 years of R&D that got us to this point. Now, when we look inside this, you're also going to see what we call our F1 seats, which is a copper-based seat, and the valve guides are manganese bronze. It also comes with instructions on how to break the seats and the valves in, which is very critical to the way they function. So, but you can see we're using the best materials available to make the seats, to make the guides. The next thing people have asked me was, what are these 3 grooves for? You got one here, and one down here. And what that basically does is when the piston's coming up for the compression stroke, it helps force the fuel mixture into the center of the chamber. But it will only do that if there's at least 42 thousandths of squish area clearance. Meaning, when the piston is at top dead center, there needs to be 42 thousandths between the top of the piston and this surface right here. Okay, the gasket surface. You gotta have at least 42 thousandths, otherwise those grooves don't work and they're worthless. Now the other thing too is with this extra 100 thousandths, and by the way, if you look, you can see we matched this entire shape between the first and second fin. No matter which way you turn it, you have that shape that goes all the way around this, all the way through to the third fin, which on all the castings that you get out of China or even Japan, you don't have that here. So we have a lot of beef behind this to keep it from warping, okay, or to keep it from doing anything under stress, okay? So that's kind of important. Now you understand what the 3 grooves are for. The last thing I want to talk about is the oil hole, which is this guy here. People start wondering, what is that hole for? Well, some people say it's an oil drain, but you know, there's also pushrod galleys, it's an oil drain. But what really happens in this hole is when the piston goes down on a power stroke or even on an empty stroke, when the piston goes down, it builds up pressure in the crankcase. That pressure starts to come through and it blows some pressure through this hole. Now we've taken that hole and we've stopped the drill at a certain point so that when the pressure comes up here, carrying a little bit of oil with it, it then shoots straight across and covers both valves. What that does, because the crankcase has a lower temperature than the head temperature, and also that this hole is running right next to the intake port, and if you're running methanol, this is extremely cold in this area, you're blowing nice cool air and oil across these springs, keeping the spring tension higher because heat is the enemy of a spring. If you run the spring too hot, it will lose performance. This hole becomes significant, especially if you're running long races. So that's what we did with that little oil hole. Now, I do want to just mention one more thing before I sign off. Is we do have a person that was testing our heads on the racetrack down south in a couple of different states for some big money races, and he was racing against all billet heads with our cast head. He qualified 5th out of, I think, 13, 14, maybe 15 racers that were all billet heads. He qualified 5th. And in the race, he had just started to pass second place and was halfway past him when second place came down on him and hooked his body, and they both got dragged to the back. But had he not done that, and had he continued the race, there's a good chance he could have won that race. But even if he didn't win, just passing for second place in a field full of billet heads, and this was a big money race, so these were not clowns that were down there. This was like a 5,000 to win race. He was walking away from the billet heads. So I'm very proud of our cylinder head, and I'm sure that you will have a lot of fun running this head. And let me give you my phone number. You can call me at any time to discuss. That's area code 702-845-7181. And keep in mind, even though that's a Las Vegas number, I'm actually on the East Coast. So if you're partying out in California, I may be dead asleep while you're still partying. So just be aware of the 3-hour time zone difference. But I will answer that phone anytime it rings, unless I'm on the phone. And that's, again, area code 702-845-7181. Or you can contact me through email, which is max@gagemotorsports.com. That's M as in Mary, AX @gagemotorsports.com. Or you can PM me on Facebook. Just look up my name, Max Gregorich. That's last name is Gregorich. And I hope to hear from all of you soon. Thank you and good night.